Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC guy. And as you can see from my apron, we're going to do some serious work today. We're going to do a two-parter, okay? Because what I want to do is show you how to install a DCC system on your model railroad. But as I explained, I believe back in video number 80, and I'll try to put a link up to it right above me here, you need to keep your equipment cool, and you need to keep it clean. And one of the best ways to do that is to put it inside of an enclosure with a fan and with all kinds of other connections provided for it. So instead of having something that's just stuck under the layout on a box top or a knocked together shelf, what I want to show you today is how to actually build a good enclosure made out of plain old lumber that you can get at your local Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever the comparable store is in the UK and New Zealand, Australia, wherever you are in the world. I'm sure you can find lumber like this. So what I want to do first, though, is zoom in here and we'll take a look at what's down here on the workbench. What I have here then laid out before you is my DCC system. This is my DCS 240. What I've done, though, is laid it out here on a piece of wood so that I can measure it. And, I've given it reasonable spacing here to allow air circulation around it. Because as I said in that video on keeping your DCC equipment cool, you have to have air circulating around these. And I'll show you in a little while how to install a fan to keep it cool. Okay, so what I did then is just laid it out here. So I've got my power supply, I've got my command station and the wiring that goes with that. And then here I have my PSX4, which I used to distribute power to the 4 main blocks on one half of the layout. Now in the past, I've just had that laid out like this in a much bigger box. What I'm going to do in the future for this box to make it smaller is I'm just going to attach this to one side of the box. Let me see if I can show you that a little bit better. There you go. So we're going to build a box. This will be attached to the side, and then there will be holes here for the wires to go out, and there'll be connectors on the outside of the box so that you can distribute power to the wiring bus as you need to. So let me turn this around. So what I came up with then, in order to get this all to fit together, is a box that's going to be 12 inches deep. Actually, that's the nominal lumber size. It's actually going to be 11 and a half because I'm going to use a 1x12. And that works out to, you can see the measurements here, 14 inches long in order to get this to fit. So I'm going to end up with a box that is 11 and a half inches wide here. It's going to be 14 inches long. And in order to allow everything here to fit in and give me room to, mount this PSX on the side, I wanted something that's going to be about 8 inches or so tall. So I ended up with a board that's here, a piece of the 1x12 that is 9.5 inches long or wide here. So what we will end up with is a box like this. See if I can show you this without it falling apart. And here's the top. And there's the box, okay, with the command station here inside. And all we're going to need to do to put this together is some wood screws. For the back of it, I've got a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. So that piece of plywood is going to fit right here on the back. This thing keeps falling apart on me here. Okay, so this will fit on the back, and it's going to really give a lot of structural strength to the box itself as well. So we'll have wood screws on the corners, top, bottom, and then we'll have this brad nailed to the outside of the box itself on the rear. What I did was I just went up to Home Depot the other day, picked up a 1x12 by 6 feet long. So convert that to metric for you guys in the UK and wherever else in the world that's working off of the metric system. So basically what I did then was got the 1x12, 6 feet long, and brought it home and got my table saw out and cut sections that were two 14 inches long and two 9.5-inch pieces. Okay, so that's going to fit like that, as I've shown you before. Okay, and the piece of plywood is 1/4 inch underlayment plywood, so it's about 3 ply, and that should give pretty good structural strength. If you don't have access to a table saw or other hand saws to be able to cut this out, go ahead and most hardware stores, lumber stores, will cut lumber for you if you give them the dimensions at the time you purchase it. So just tell them, you need the piece however long you want. So you will need to lay out your DCC system on your board, on a board somewhere, just like I've done. Measure what dimensions you're going to need, and then go to the hardware store and get them to pre-cut you, the pieces that you're going to want, including, your piece of plywood here. What I want to do now, though, is start putting this together to make a box. And I'm not going to show you every screw that I'm putting in and every nail that I put in. So what I'm going to do first, though, is I'm going to get the DCC system out of the way and start attaching the various ends of the box to the bottom and the top. And I'll show you piecemeal as I go along. Another thing that I wanted to show you before I go on, I did a video recently on 5 great new gadgets for your model railroad, and one of those was the DCC Concepts Alpha Meter. So I'm going to use that in this installation, and for that I took a piece of that 1/4 inch plywood, and I went ahead, I downloaded a copy of the cutout template from the DCC Concepts website, and cut it out here for the opening, and used that to transfer the dimensions of this template to the piece of 1/4 inch plywood left over from that other piece that I just showed you. And I went ahead, cut this out using a jigsaw, and then the Alpha Meter just sits right in here, and that's going to be attached to the top of the box so that you'll be able to see the voltage and the amperage draw on the DCC system in real time. As soon as you turn it on, this guy is going to light up and give you the voltage and the amperage that's being pulled by the whole layout. I'll show you more on this in a little while when I get ready to install it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to want to do here is, like I said, make the connections here between the end of the board and the bottom. And for that, I'm going to drill some holes, but I want to pre-mark where I'm going to put the holes. I'm going to mark the width here, okay? And then I'm going to want to put a screw maybe here, here, and here. Okay, so I've got this countersinking bit, and I've set it for 1 1/4 inches to match this wood screw. And what I'm going to have to do then is drill holes down through these marks that I've made so that I can screw this whole operation together. So let me get that out of the way, and we'll go ahead and start drilling some holes in these so I can pre-drill them. And I'm going to make a mess all over the floor and clean it up later. So here we go. Close your ears. I'll try to cut this noise out in the editing. Okay, then we're going to need to do the same thing on the other end. And like I said, I will probably edit out a lot of this drilling and the like. As I doubt that you want to watch me do a bunch of drilling. But let's go ahead and make the marks about here and about here. Okay. And get those drilled. Okay. Okay, I'm going to turn the camera off and do the other board just like this one. Okay, so I've got a couple more holes here to drill on this one. Now I have to drill the mating holes in the end of the piece of wood that's going to be the bottom and the top. And as you can see, I've got it clamped here. And I'm just going to put this down on top so that the ends match up. Okay, now I've got that done. Let's go ahead and we'll drive some screws home. Okay, so I've got my Phillips head bit here and a box full of 1 1/4 inch wood screws. And we'll go ahead and punch these in. The last one there. Okay. Now pop that out. And let's work on the other end. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just set this one down here for the other end and get things lined up. So, in order to get this out, I'm going to have to take the back of the table off. Which on these old workmates is fairly easy to do, and that frees up the board. Okay, we'll drop that back into place and we're ready to go. So now we've got part of the box done, okay, and we just need to add a top. And with that, we have the basic box built. So, as I told you before, the next step is to attach the backing to the box. And for that, I'm going to have to crank up my air compressor and get out my brad nailer and punch those brads in. So I'll be back in a few minutes after I have finished putting the back on. Okay, so all it took was just a few shots of my brad nailer around the edges. I mean, it literally took longer to crank up the pump and get it ready to go than it did to finish this nailing job. So if you don't have one of these, get out your hammer and some brads and pop in some. Okay, so now you can see how everything fits in the box. However, one thing we've got to do is we've got to provide some holes. First off, we need to provide holes to feed a power cord in to the power supply. We also need some holes over here above the PSX to get these wires outside the box. The other thing, you're going to want some holes in the back, or a hole in the back, for the Loconet, in my case, your throttle bus wires to go out. And I bring those out through the back and make those connections. And another thing that we're going to want to add in here is this little muffin fan. Now these are the kind of fans that you see on your desktop computers to keep them cool. So I'm going to be mounting that on the inside back here towards the rear. And so I'm going to need to drill a hole to let the air in. And for that, I have this hole saw. You can pick this up at your local hardware store. You know, it's a Linux product, is the name brand. And I think this is probably, okay, it says it's a 76 millimeter. So that's what, 3 inches? Okay, so we got about a 3-inch hole saw. So I'm going to be drilling a hole here in the end of the box in order to mount this fan and let the air in. Now for all those other holes that I told you about, I have this other hole saw that's about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, something like that. So I'm going to put a couple of holes here on this end over here by the PSX to let the wires out, and I'm going to put 2 holes here in the back. one set of holes for the LocoNet cables, and then a second hole for the power, the AC power to come in, and also for the DC power to come in to operate that fan. So once again, these I'm going to have to take it outside because these generate a lot of dust, and I don't want to fill the train room with a bunch of dust. So as you can see, we've got the 3-inch hole on the side drilled to mount the fan. I've got my 2 holes in the back for power, and then I've got the 2 holes here on the end for routing power out to the main buses, DCC buses, that are going to run out to the 4 blocks on one half of the Piedmont Southern. So the next step then is let's go ahead and get things set up at least for mounting the DCC Concepts Alpha Meter. And what I plan to do is mount the Alpha Meter right like this, so we'll be able to see it once this is mounted underneath of the layout. Now, ideally, I would have liked to put this on the fascia. It would have looked really good on my fascia. However, the point where I'm going to put this power box is in a curved section of fascia. So this is not going to fit flush on that. So I decided that it would be easier in the long run just to go ahead and attach a piece of plywood inside the box here. And what I'm going to do after that is I'm going to cut a piece of plexiglass that I also picked up at the hardware store the other day. And we're going to cut that out. Actually, I'm going to cut this piece of it off. And I'm going to mount that on hinges so that I'll be able to keep this nice and tightly sealed, and the air blowing, from the fan is going to blow across all the components instead of coming out the front of the box. So I'll show you that in another step. So the first thing, though, let's go ahead. I want to go ahead and mount this piece of plywood that I've cut out right here. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use some angle brackets. And these are just simple right angle brackets, also picked up at the hardware store. And I'm going to put, one on each side of the piece of plywood, and they'll be screwed into the underside here. And, they'll be attached to the back side of the piece of plywood so that it's going to fit flush inside of that plexiglass cover. So it's going to be protected from dust and dirt, and it's going to be cooled by the fan. Everything inside, once I get that plexiglass door on, is going to be protected and stay cool as well. So I'm going to go ahead and I've got to drill a couple of holes to mount this angle bracket in here, and then we'll put it in place. Okay, so you can see I've put this together. I found some nice little decorative brass screws and nuts at Home Depot while I was there. So I've gone ahead and mounted those to give the angle brackets, a good nice fit against the top of the box here. So that's going to hold the Alpha Meter in place. And I don't care if I can see the DCC system or not. I can see enough of it through there. And this is really going to look nice, because what I'm going to do is, before this all goes together and before you see it on Monday, it's going to all be painted a nice dark green, so it's going to match the fascia on the rest of the layout. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the Alpha Meter or mount ready to go. Okay, so what I want to do then is I've got to tip this up so that the box is face down. And then let me line this up here in the back. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and run a line here along the box so that I know the exact dimensions. I've done the one here on the side too. So all I have to do is cut this piece of plexiglass out now, and I'm good to go with a door. Okay, so I have the piece of plexiglass set up with a metal ruler here laid out along the edge that I just marked. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to use a very sharp blade here, and we're going to cut a mark right across it. Give it a couple of really good scores here. And then I'm going to try to pop that off. Okay, let's take that out. And this one. And put the ruler down. And it should just pop right off quite easily. That's assuming it doesn't break along a fault line somewhere. There we go. And we got a good break there. You never know with these things, but for the most part, if you get a good score, they'll pop right along an even line. Okay, so let me go ahead and cut that loose. Okay, so that's going to be a nice covering there. Okay, now the next thing I have to do is score it for the other dimension on that end. Okay, so now I've got the piece of plexiglass cut, and as you can see, it's going to drop down just like this and give us access to all the components on the inside and still allow us to see the readout from the alpha meter. So next step, I need to get the hinges and attach them to the piece of plexiglass and get that set up and ready to install. Okay, so what you see here, I've added the door. Notice the hinges here, and it just drops right on down for full access to the equipment inside. And then I've got a couple of magnetic latches installed here to keep it closed. So that's going to make it very convenient. It doesn't take a lot of effort to open it up, and it'll just drop right down and give you full access. Plus that nice clear acrylic sheet gives you a very good view of the DCC Concepts Alpha Meter here, so we'll be able to see the voltage and the amperage without any problem. And on Monday, I'll go through the process of adding the fan and its power supply and all of the other components that that I showed you at the beginning of the video for the DCC system. We'll get those installed, add some terminal blocks on the outside to make it easier to connect the power to the various buses, because I'll have 4 DCC buses moving out in 4 different directions from this central location. Come on back Monday for the rest of the video and see how to install a DCC system in your model railroad. Have a good weekend now. Bye.